نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد بسم الله. Today inshallah we will continue from verse number 41 of Surah Ghafir. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ويا قوم ما لي أدعوكم إلى النجاة وتدعونني إلى النار تدعونني لأكفر بالله وأشرك به ما ليس لي به علم وأنا أدعوكم إلى العزيز الغفار لا جرم أن ما تدعونني إليه ليس له دعوة في الدنيا ولا في الآخرة وأن مردنا إلى الله وأن المسرفين هم أصحاب النار. And O my people, how is it that I invite you to salvation while you invite me to the fire? You invite me to disbelieve in Allah and associate with Him that of which I have no knowledge, and I invite you to the exalted in might, the perpetual forgiver. Assuredly, you call me to the one that does not have a claim in this world or in the hereafter, and indeed our return is to Allah, and indeed the transgressors will be companions of the fire. So la jarama means haqqan, and surely indeed, and ليس له دعوة means لا يستحق الدعوة إلى عبادته. It's not worthy of being called for worship. So the righteous person of Fir'aun was calling people towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and yet people of Fir'aun were inviting him to accept Fir'aun as Lord and hence commit shirk. When we read this verse, we may not realize that a similar situation may be presented to many of us on a daily basis. So shirk is the extreme form of sin. But we can think of our daily interaction with others when people invite us towards other types of sins. Imagine a friend or colleague calling you up. Let's go watch such and such movie tonight. Let's plan to go to the next rave party in town. Let's try out a new substance or even a legal drug like cannabis. All these are invitations to sin. What should be our response? At minimum, not to accept the offer, but ideally it is to go one step further and even discourage others from getting involved in such sin. And look at what was at stake for this righteous person in Fir'aun's time. His life was at risk, and then compare what is your risk in this case. Probably just an upset friend or a colleague at best. Towards the end of the verse, وَأَنَّ مَرَدَّنَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَأَنَّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ هُمْ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ. So مَرَدَّنَا means رُجُوعَنَا بَعْدَ الْمَوْتِ إِلَيْهِ تَعَالَى لِلْجَزَاءِ. Our return after death towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for compensation. And this is a wise reminder that all of us have to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for those people who are musrifeen, who are transgressors, those who associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their final abode is rather painful. It is the hellfire. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all. Ameen. فَسَتَذْكُرُونَ مَا أَقُولُ لَكُمْ وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَصِيرٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. And you remember what I now say to you, and I entrust my affair to Allah. Indeed, Allah is seeing of His servants. أُفَوِّضُ means أَعْتَصِمُ وَأَلْجَأُ وَأَتَوَكَّلُ. I take refuge in, or I put trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the end of the speech by the believer, and he had concealed his faith until now, but this discourse had revealed his belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to others. So he sensed that Fir'aun and his people may cause harm to him, and hence he sought protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by saying, "Ufawwidu amri ila Allah." I entrust my affairs to Allah. And this is such a powerful statement. I put my trust in Allah. I submit to Allah's power to protect me. Once you say it, you feel a huge burden off your shoulders. For all matters where you felt you were handling them alone and is struggling, this expression is a sudden relief. And subhanAllah, when you look at the Sunnah of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, you see the same phrase adopted by him as a daily practice. Narrated by Al-Bara bin Azib anhu in Bukhari, when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam went to bed, he used to sleep on his right side and then say, Allahumma aslamtu nafsi ilayk, wa wajjahtu wajhi ilayk, wa fawwadtu amri ilayk, wa alja'tu zahri ilayk, raghbatan wa rahbatan ilayk, la malja'a wa la manja'a minka illa ilayk, amantu bi kitabika alladhi anzalta wa nabiyyaka alladhi arsalta. O Allah, I have surrendered myself over to you and have turned my face towards you and leave all my affairs to you and depend on you and put my trust in you, expecting your reward and fearing your punishment. There is neither fleeing from you nor refuge but with you. I believe in the book, that is Quran, which you have revealed, and in your prophet, that is Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, whom you have sent. So this was the practice of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Going to bed every night, he used to make this dua. And then towards the end of the narration, it comes, وَقَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ مَنْ قَالَهُنَّ ثُمَّ مَاتَ تَحْتَ لَيْلَتِهِ مَاتَ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ. Whoever recites these words before going to bed and dies the same night, he will die upon Islam. Let's try to make this a habit, learn this dua, and read it before going to bed, and inshallah, we will get the reward by following the sunnah, and if it is destined to pass away that night, we will die upon Islam. فَوَقَاهُ اللَّهُ سَيِّئَاتِ مَا مَكَرُوا وَحَاقَ بِآلِ فِرْعَوْنَ سُوءُ الْعَذَابِ النَّارُ يُعْرَضُونَ عَلَيْهَا غُدُوًّا وَعَشِيًّا وَيَوْمَ تَقُومُ السَّاعَةُ أَدْخِلُوا آلَ فِرْعَوْنَ أَشَدَّ الْعَذَابِ. So Allah protected him from the evils they plotted, and the people of Fir'aun were enveloped by the worst of punishment, the fire. They are exposed to it morning and evening, and the day the hour appears, it will be said, make the people of Fir'aun enter the severest punishment. So غُدُوًّا وَعَشِيًّا means أَوَّلَ النَّهَارِ وَآخِرَهُ, صَبَاحًا وَمَسَاءً, meaning the morning and in the evening. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala confirmed that He saved that person, the righteous person in the family of Fir'aun, from any harm. And in addition, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informs us of the consequence of shirk committed by Fir'aun and his people. They were drowned in the sea, and then their souls are exposed to fire every morning and evening until the day of judgment, when they will be sent to severe punishment in the hereafter and burnt in fire perpetually. When you read this verse carefully, you notice that Fir'aun and his people are exposed to fire from the time of their death to the day of judgment. This state between this world and the hereafter is called barzakh. So when people pass away and are buried, they're also in the same state of barzakh. And hence, scholars derive from this verse a proof that there will be punishment in graves, similar to how people of Fir'aun are getting exposed to the fire morning and evening. There are also many ahadith that prove the punishment of graves. One of them even mentions exposing people every morning and evening to their destination, similar to what is mentioned in this verse for the people of Fir'aun. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar anhu in Bukhari and Muslim, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, إِنَّ أَحَدَكُمْ إِذَا مَاتَ عُرِضَ عَلَيْهِ مَقْعَدُهُ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ إِنْ كَانَ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ فَمِنْ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ وَإِنْ كَانَ مِنْ أَهْلِ النَّارِ فَمِنْ أَهْلِ النَّارِ يُقَالُ هَذَا مَقْعَدُكَ حَتَّى يَبْعَثَكَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. Verily, when one of you dies, he is shown his place morning and evening. If he is among the inhabitants of paradise, then he is among the inhabitants of paradise. If he is among the inhabitants of the hellfire, then he is among the inhabitants of the hellfire. It will be said, this is your place until you are raised on the day of judgment. Let's review verses 41 to 46. We should reject any call to sin and return it with a call towards the truth, and put all of our matters in trust of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and do that tawakkul that He is the one who is going to make things easy for us and make things happen for us. And punishment in the grave is real, and souls are exposed to their final abode in the mornings and in the evenings. وَإِذْ يَتَحَاجُّونَ فِي النَّارِ فَيَقُولُ الضُّعَفَاءُ لِلَّذِينَ اسْتَكْبَرُوا إِنَّا كُنَّا لَكُمْ تَبَعًا فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُغْنُونَ عَنَّا نَصِيبًا مِنَ النَّارِ. And mention when they will argue within the fire, and the weak will say to those who had been arrogant, indeed we were only your followers, so will you relieve us of a share of the fire? قال الذين استكبروا إنا كل فيها إن الله قد حكم بين العباد. Those who had been arrogant will say, indeed all of us are in it. Indeed Allah has judged between the servants. There are going to be exchanges between different groups within hellfire, and arguments will happen between them when they are punished. The followers will try to look up towards their leaders and ask for help. They will request to take away some portion of the punishment, but these leaders will excuse themselves because they already had their share of punishment to bear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ حَكَمَ بَيْنَ الْعِبَادِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already distributed the punishment based on what everyone deserved. So there is no need for further sharing or equalization. And the truth is that they would all have been given double the punishment due to severity of their sins, as we learn in Surah A'raf, verse 38, قَالَ لِكُلٍّ ضِعْفٌ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. He, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will say, for each is double, but you do not know. وقال الذين في النار لخزنة جهنم ادعوا ربكم يخفف عنا يوما من العذاب. And those in the fire will say to the keepers of hell, supplicate your Lord to lighten for us a day from the punishment. قالوا أولم تك تأتيكم رسلكم بالبينات قالوا بلى قالوا فادعوا وما دعاء الكافرين إلا في ضلال. They will say, did there not come to you your messengers with clear proofs? They will say, yes. They will reply, then supplicate yourselves, but the supplication of the disbelievers is not except in error. So dalal here means فَلَا يُقْبَلُ وَلَا يُسْتَجَابُ, that it will be wasted, it will not be responded. The dwellers of hell will continue to look for any relief, so they will now ask the keepers of hell to pray for them. And these guards will remind them that they had the chance to follow guidance when messengers came to them with clear signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this world. So now that they failed to comply when they had received the guidance, there is no support available in the hereafter. And rest assured, you can go ahead, make your dua, but your dua will not be accepted. The question comes, why are these people not asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly and instead trying to go through the guards of hell? That is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already scolded them and rebuked them when they tried the first time. As it comes in Surah Mu'minun, verse number 108, قَالَ اخْسَئُوا فِيهَا وَلَا تُكَلِّمُونَ. He, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will say, remain despised therein and do not speak with me. So to quickly review verses 47 to 50, both leaders and the followers of falsehood will get severe punishment in the hereafter, and no supplication will be responded to in the hellfire. إِنَّا لَنَنصُرُ رُسُلَنَا وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَيَوْمَ يَقُومُ الْأَشْهَادُ. Indeed, we will support our messengers and those who believe during the life of this world and on the day when the witnesses will stand. This verse carries the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He will keep helping His messengers and believers in this world and in the hereafter. But if we look at the life of some of the prophets, it appears they have had a lot of hardships. Ibrahim alayhi salam and our Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had to migrate away from their homeland. Prior to that, Yahya alayhi salam was brutally beheaded. And according to some historians, Zakaria alayhi salam was also martyred. So the question would be, how do we explain the support of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse? And similar things could apply to group of believers. History tells us many atrocities have been committed against pious believers of the past. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is confirming His support, His promise of support, then how do we explain the hardships and trials that happened in the past? Where was the support of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that time? Scholars explain that the verse mentions nusra, meaning help or support, and it could be taken as intisar, meaning victory. So if the support is not obvious during the life of prophets and believers, then it becomes evident in the defeat of their enemies after their death. In other words, the prophets and the believers may have been killed, but their religion, their call will prevail in the world, and their enemies will be destroyed, even if that happens after the passing away of the prophets and the believers. That is the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they will be victorious. It's about intisar. The last part of the verse mentions يَوْمَ يَقُومُ الْأَشْهَادِ, the day witnesses will come forward, meaning the day of judgment. So not only will the prophets and believers will be supported in this world, but they definitely will be victorious on the day of judgment. يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ الظَّالِمِينَ مَعْذِرَتُهُمْ وَلَهُمُ اللَّعْنَةُ وَلَهُمْ سُوءُ الدَّارِ. The day their excuse will not benefit the wrongdoers, and they will have the curse, and they will have the worst abode. مَعْذِرَتُهُمْ مِنْ عُذْرُهُمْ, their excuse. So no excuse will be accepted on the day of judgment, since all the proofs and signs were already established in this world for people to accept the truth. And the word la'na means الطرد والإبعاد من رحمة الله, expulsion and banishment from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So imagine our need of Allah's mercy in this world every step of the way. And how would life be without His mercy here? Then on the day of judgment, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is angry like He had never been before, what would be the condition of those people who have the la'na, the curse, the expulsion from His mercy? They will have no support, and they will get the worst of punishment. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا مُوسَى الْهُدَى وَأَوْرَثْنَا بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ الْكِتَابَ هُدًى وَذِكْرَى لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. And we had certainly given Musa guidance, and we caused the children of Israel to inherit the scripture as guidance and a reminder for those of understanding. So the book mentioned here, Al-Kitab, is Torah. And after Fir'aun and his people were destroyed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let the rest of Bani Israel inherit the land and the wealth of Fir'aun. And why was that? Because they followed their messenger, Musa alayhi salam, and they remained patient. فاصبر إن وعد الله حق واستغفر لذنبك وسبح بحمد ربك بالعشي والإبكار. So be patient, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Indeed, the promise of Allah is true, and ask forgiveness for your sin, and exalt Allah with praise of your Lord in the evening and in the morning. After mentioning people of Musa alayhi salam, now the address changes to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he's asked to be patient with the assurance that the promise of Allah, His help and His victory is true. We also learn about a similar command to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Surah Ahqaf, verse 35. فَاصْبِرْ كَمَا صَبَرَ أُولُو الْعَزْمِ مِنَ الرُّسُلِ وَلَا تَسْتَعْجِلْ لَهُمْ. So be patient, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as were those of determination among the messengers, and do not be impatient for them. After the command for patience comes the command to ask for forgiveness. وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لِذَنْبِكَ. But we know that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and even other prophets are ma'soom. They do not commit sins. So why was Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam asked to seek forgiveness for his sins? Scholars explain this is actually an instruction for the Ummah of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to be persistently seeking forgiveness and to be glorifying Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala in the morning and in the evening. Bil-ashi wal-ibkar. So to be precise, bil-ashi wal-ibkar means fi akhir an-nahari wa awwalihi, the end of the night and the beginning of the day. So those are considered as good times to focus and make dhikr and remember Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. إن الذين يجادلون في آيات الله بغير سلطان أتاهم إن في صدورهم إلا كبر ما هم ببالغيه فاستعذ بالله إنه هو السميع البصير. Indeed, those who dispute concerning the signs of Allah without any authority having come to them, there is not within their breasts except pride, the extent of which they cannot reach. So seek refuge in Allah. Indeed, it is He who is the hearing, the seeing. So ma hum bibalighi requires some explanation. People who dispute in the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without any knowledge are exhibiting this behavior mainly because they have extreme pride and arrogance in their hearts. And the truth is, they will never reach their goal, their objective, just by carrying this pride. It's actually going to defeat them. Ma hum bibalighi. They will never reach the purpose that they have in mind, which is to argue and deny the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fasta'idh billah. Seek Allah's protection from becoming one of these people who argue about the ayats of Allah. That's what we should be doing, not getting into arguments about the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And here, explicit command is given. Fasta'idh billah. Seek Allah's protection so that you do not get into this predicament. Let's review verses 51 to 56. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises to support prophets and believers in this world as well as in the hereafter. And no excuse will be accepted on the day of judgment. There is necessity of patience and endurance in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you call people towards Allah, like Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam did and all the prophets before him, there is a need for you to be patient and bear the difficulties and challenges of this path. And then one should seek forgiveness of sins and continuously engage in remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the mornings and in the evenings. لخلق السماوات والأرض أكبر من خلق الناس ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. The creation of the heavens and the earth is greater than the creation of mankind, but most of the people do not know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us it is easy for Him to resurrect people again in the hereafter. And the logical argument is something like this. He created the heavens and the earth, which are of much higher magnitude and size than the creation of mankind. And He had already created mankind the first time. So there should be no doubt in people's mind about His ability to resurrect people again. It comes in Surah Ahqaf, verse 33. أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا أَنَّ اللَّهَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ وَلَمْ يَعْيَ بِخَلْقِهِنَّ بِقَادِرٍ عَلَىٰ أَنْ يُحْيِيَ الْمَوْتَى بَلَىٰ إِنَّهُ عَلَىٰ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. You do not see that Allah, who created the heavens and the earth and did not fail in their creation, is able to give life to the dead? Yes, indeed, He is over all things competent. And interestingly, when people of Makkah were asked about who created the heavens and the earth, they had no doubt that it was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who created. As it comes in Surah Ankabut, verse 61, وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ وَسَخَّرَ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهُ فَأَنَّى يُؤْفَكُونَ. If you ask them, who created the heavens and the earth and subjected the sun and the moon, they would surely say Allah. Then how are they deluded? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to the same thing here, that I was the one who created the heavens and the earth. Then why do you not get it that I can also resurrect people? Because I already created them the first time. وما يستوي الأعمى والبصير والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات ولا المسيء قليلا ما تذكرون. And not equal are the blind and the seeing, nor are those who believe and do righteous deeds and the evildoer. Little do you remember. Just like the blind and those with sight are not equal, people who believe and perform good deeds, righteous deeds, cannot be equal to the evildoers. إن الساعة لآتية لا ريب فيها ولكن أكثر الناس لا يؤمنون. Indeed, the hour is coming, no doubt about it, but most of the people do not believe. لا ريب فيها لا شك فيها. There is no doubt in the Day of Judgment, but most people find it impossible to believe because they only look at the physical world that they are in, and they do not have that faith in the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring everyone to justice and resurrect people again. وقال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم إن الذين يستكبرون عن عبادتي سيدخلون جهنم داخرين. And your Lord says, call upon me, I will respond to you. Indeed, those who disdain my worship will enter hell, rendered contemptible. So داخرين means صاغرين, حقيرين, humiliated. So dua literally means to call, and it is often used when someone calls to fulfill his needs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes a special favor to Ummah of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this verse. We are ordered to make dua with the assurance that it will be answered. Ud'uni astajib lakum. Call upon me, I will respond to you. And dua and worship are very closely related. In fact, they embody the same characteristics of humility and dependency. When a person makes dua, he is acknowledging lack of power or control. And at the same time, he's accepting a state of need and dependency on the Creator. Similarly, during worship, a person bows down to accept the supremacy of his Creator and utters words of praise and glory to attract the grace and blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, we see the same connection made between dua and worship in a hadith narrated by Nu'man bin Bashir in the Sunan Abi Dawud. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ad-du'a huwa al-ibadah." Supplication, dua, is itself the worship. And scholars explain that if someone supplicates to a person or a deity other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they have actually now associated partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because now they're engaged in worship. So you only make dua to someone who you believe has the power to fulfill your needs. And because dua is ibadah, by calling someone else, you're actually worshiping that person or that deity. With this relationship in mind between dua and worship, let's look at the second part of the verse. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ عَنْ عِبَادَتِي سَيَدْخُلُونَ جَهَنَّمَ دَاخِرِينَ. And now it becomes clear that the worship mentioned here is actually referring to dua. So anyone who refrains from making dua out of a sense of being self-sufficient and independent, there's a warning of entry into hellfire. There should be no doubt in our minds that dua brings many barakah, blessings, and in particular it attracts the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is a means to attain closeness to Him. Let's take a look at some ahadith describing the fadail, the virtues of dua, narrated by Anas bin Malik radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Tirmidhi, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ad-du'a mukhul ibadah." Dua is the essence of worship. And then another narration narrated by Abu Hurairah radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu, Tirmidhi, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man lam yas'alillaha yaghdab alayhi." Whoever never asks Allah, He becomes angry with him. And The next one is an amazing narration, narrated by Ibn Umar and Tirmidhi. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, "Man futiha lahu minkum babu du'ai, futihat lahu abwab al-rahmah." Whoever among you has the door of supplication open for him, the door of mercy is open for him as well. Allahu Akbar. We should strive to make dua. We should strive to humble ourselves, express our inability to do anything that we want to do in this world, and keep making that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Glorify Him and understand that He's the only source of fulfilling our needs. When it comes to the acceptance of dua, here is something also important to understand. Dua is such a beloved act near Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that even dua of disbelievers is accepted. So we know that the dua of Iblis, who is the cursed one, has been accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He will let him live until the day of judgment. So imagine the willingness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept the dua of a believer. فَادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. Allahu Akbar. Let's review verses 57 to 60. Creation of the heavens and the earth is greater than the creation of mankind. And then there is no doubt that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can resurrect mankind in the hereafter, because He created them the first time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us to make dua and guarantees its acceptance. We'll stop here inshallah. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم